Hello, welcome everybody to the Julie Wrigley Global Futures Laboratory sponsored talk organized by scholars from the governance and decision-making and systems modeling themes of the Global Futures Lab, supported by a seed grant from the College of Global Futures. I am Elisa Jane Bienenstock, a research professor at the Watts College of Public Service and Community Solutions and the School of Public Affairs. And I and my colleague, Shauna Burnsilver, associate professor of the School of Human Evolution and Social Change, Michael Simeone, Director of Data Science and Analytics, ASU Libraries and SCAC faculty, and Michael Barton, Professor in the School of Human Evolution and Social Change and SCAC, are very excited to present to you our guest speaker this afternoon, Dr. Christopher McCarty. Chris wears multiple hats. He's a professor of anthropology at the University of Florida, an associate dean at UFL in the College of Arts and Sciences, and director of the university's Bureau of Economic and Business Research. I've known Chris, who is known for advancing and validating methods and developing software, EgoNet, for gathering social network data from interviews and surveys since we were both graduate students. In recent years, he has established himself with a very creative, rigorous, and innovative studies on scientific research networks at the University of Florida. Shauna, Michael, and I reached out to him to consult on the design of our study of interdisciplinary collaboration, innovation, and inclusion, all ASU priorities, among senior sustainability scientists and scholars, the 4S group, for GFL. We were delighted that our discussions have led to a nascent collaboration and that he graciously agreed to share his theoretical and programmatic insights from this first stage of our collaboration with the ASU community in this talk today entitled Comparing Incentivization Strategies for Cross-Disciplinary Collaboration Outcomes at Arizona State University and University of Florida. So now I will turn over the floor, the screen, and the microphone to Dr. Christopher McCarty.
All right. Thank you, Elisa, very much. And I want to thank you all for having me here. This is my first plane flight since COVID, so it's nice to be traveling again and nice to see Phoenix again. So I did this work with the collaboration of two postdocs that I want to call out. Tom Smith and Till Krenz are both expert in network analysis and natural language processing. You'll see a lot of their analysis at the end, so I just want to, again, remind everybody they're postdocs. And so if there's any interest in people with this kind of skill set, please do reach out to me. So when we first discussed this, it seemed, I thought it was a pretty simple thing. Let's just look at two universities that have different histories in terms of incentivizing collaboration and compare them and see how it works out. I'm going to give you a couple of spoilers. One of them is that you're going to see that there's been a dramatic increase in collaboration at both places over time. And I also think you're going to find out that comparing the University of Florida and Arizona State University is like comparing apples and oranges. We're different sizes. We have very different kinds of histories. But with that, I think that the analysis was instructive for me, and I think will be hopefully instructive for you. While we're waiting for this, I will point out, you'll see that there's an acknowledgement to the Clinical Translational Science Institute at the University of Florida. It's a CTSA. You're going to hear a lot about CTSAs in this talk. What I'm about to talk to you about is not the opinion of the NIH. Or necessarily the UFCTSI, but it was sponsored by that. Yay, there we go. Thank you very much. All right, apologize for that. To begin the talk, let me set a little context. I think we all know what cross-disciplinary research is, but I think it's worth just agreeing on what that means. So it's research that involves researchers from two or more disciplines, right? Disciplines tend to reflect college and departmental administrative boundaries. That's not an accident. For example, I'm an anthropologist. We have departments of anthropology because anthropologists have been doing what they do for over 100 years. And administrative boundaries then reinforce the disciplinary boundaries, right? So there's a sort of feedback there. At least for 20 years, and I think much longer than that, there's been discussion about breaking down silos, and that those departments create silos, and that stymies progress. So why do we want to cross disciplines? Why do we want to break down silos? There's this sense that the whole is greater than the sum of the parts, that if you put two disciplines together, you not only have the current solutions and problems in those disciplines, but there are new things, right? And new areas of research result in new solutions to existing problems. It's important to note that when you combine disciplines, you have the option of combining substantive focus, right? Disciplines focus on particular problems, but they also have particular solutions. So there's both a substantive benefit and of putting two substantive focus together, as well as methods. Silo disciplines tend to yield siloed problems. So disciplines have problems that have endured for a long time, but they're not perhaps as forward looking. So crossing disciplines, I think we also assume, is going to yield some sort of benefit in terms of productivity. And at the end of the day, we really think that crossing disciplines should help society. So as much as we're all focused on getting the next publication, getting the next grant, really the idea is that society should benefit somehow from all of this. So how do universities go about incentivizing collaboration? I think a very typical way is the creation of centers and institutes. These are places where people from different disciplinary boundaries can come together, work on problems. They can be less efficient than other solutions because those researchers are still bound by the administrative constraints of their departments. They're also bound by the locational constraints. So centers and institutes can only do so much. There are seed grants and pilot awards. So most universities have these. We often do those around particular research areas. So for example, UF, like many universities, are now creating seed grants around artificial intelligence, racial equity since the murder of George Floyd. There's lots of these kinds of focused seed grants. Cluster hires or large faculty recruitment initiatives can be collaborative. We've again had this at the University of Florida. I think you have them here. We've done a big initiative around AI where there are actually requirements of people membership from different colleges. There are collaboration events. So sometimes we do these speed dating events where a bunch of people come together. You have like a minute to describe to somebody what you do, and then you move on to the next person, and out of those things come collaborations. Less typical approaches are putting people from different departments into the same building. So again, at UF, they are currently building a large data science building. It will ultimately include a lot of people from the health sciences, a lot of people from engineering. But at the end of the day, those people still have those administrative constraints that pull them back to those administrative boundaries. The ASU approach is viewed by many to be a much more radical version of this. So reorganization of departments, schools, and colleges around larger problems, and the elimination of some of those administrative boundaries. So the idea here was to compare ASU to UF in this regard. I should point out that this all doesn't exist in a vacuum. There are interdisciplinary opportunities presented by funding agencies. NSF, NIH, Department of Defense have cross-cutting programs. They all have institutes or programs that exist from one year to the next, but there are these cross-cutting programs, and that also stimulates interdisciplinarity and collaboration. So what are the interventions that have occurred at ASU and UF? Both universities have established centers. We have institutes. We both do seed grants. We both do cluster hires. ASU is known for the big reorganization that began in 2003. This was certainly in part to stimulate interdisciplinary collaboration around larger, more problem-focused topics. I learned in the course of doing this that there was another reason for it, which was to eliminate some redundancy that existed at ASU across campuses. So There were multiple reasons for doing this. At UF, I think the major intervention is something that I've been involved in, which is a Clinical Translational Science Award. And I'll give you a description of that. So what is a Clinical Translational Science Award? Back in the early 2000s, there were discussions at NIH about the pattern of translation of results of science that NIH had funded to actually help human people, right? So the purpose of NIH is to improve public health or the health typically of Americans. And it was recognized that some science, a lot of science actually gets stuck. So where does science get stuck? Sometimes science gets stuck in journals. People publish in journals, but it doesn't really go anywhere from there. Sometimes science gets stuck at IRBs. IRBs can't agree with the researchers about how to conduct it. Science can get stuck at FDA approval. Science can also get stuck because we're all siloed, right? So the NIH created the CTSAs. It created a new institute called NCATS. And the tagline for CTSAs is getting science from bench to bedside. So as you can see, they really think that they need to stimulate the translation of scientific impact to the public, and collaboration collaboration within the consortium of CTSAs is a big part of that. This is a map of all the current CTSAs. There are more than 50. At one point, there were more than 60. So the number of CTSAs fluctuates a bit. They're 5-year grants. These are not just your run-of-the-mill investment by NIH. These are big institutional grants. They require a very big institutional commitment, both in terms of investment of dollars, but also investment in cultural and processual change, right? So if you get a CTSA, you are signaling to the NIH that you want to be part of this consortium, and you're going to kind of change the way things are done. I will point out there's a lot of them up in the Northeast. The early CTSAs, a bunch of them in the Northeast in California. Florida has 2, one at the University of Florida, one at the University of Miami. Arizona currently has none, and that's something that I think should change. So the CTSI timeline at UF, the first 12 CTSAs were established in 2006. UF got its first CTSA in 2008. It was a 5-year grant. Where I came into contact with it was when they were approaching a renewal. There was a concern that they needed to be able to demonstrate the scientific impact that they've had. I was working with a visiting student at the time from Italy, Raphael Vaca. We were doing some other network analysis together. And we said, well, we can do this if we have grant publication data. So we were given access to a lot of publication data, grant data. We created networks from those. We were able to easily demonstrate a CTSI effect on the institution. So the PI thought it would be a good idea to put network science in as an optional module. So that happened. We were funded in 2014. Then when the second renewal came up, we were again asked to be an optional module. We were funded at this second time. So we're now in this second renewal period. I want to point out that Arizona should have a CTSA. And when I first started talking with the group here, I thought that there might be somebody here working on that. They introduced me to Scott Leischow. Scott, this is an org chart. You can see that Scott is the executive director of clinical and translational science. There have been a lot of efforts here to working in this area. And I'm using Scott's slides right now. They do, among other things, affinity networks, translational teams. Scott's going to talk more about that tomorrow. I want to point out that the foundational practices and principles very closely align with the things that you have to have in a CTSA application. So if you look at this timeline, you can see that your Arizona State is well positioned, I think, to get a CTSA. And that's, I think, what Scott's trying to do. He'll talk about that. So let me talk a minute about our network science team, why you should be listening to me in the first place. These are the aims from the most recently funded grant. We are turning from an inward focus at UF to a more consortium-wide focus. We are taking the technology that we've created at UF and using it to map research communities at participating CTSAs. So working, for example, with Arizona State is very much in line with our aims. Evaluating the effect of the CTSAs on scientific collaborations and productivity. And the third aim is quite important, identifying cross-CTSA collaborative opportunities using topic models. So I'll show you an intervention later that we did where we have to rely on using networks that are imputed from topical overlap rather than behavior. So I'm going to start with a brief network primer. I don't assume that everybody knows what a network is, so this takes about a minute and a half. So imagine in networks, we think about nodes and edges. So nodes are actors, and for us, actors are researchers. So imagine this set of researchers. This is just an example. Here they are just existing in space. Sometimes researchers collaborate. So they collaborate by publishing together. They're on grants together. They may co-mentor students together, maybe on patents. There's many, many ways that researchers collaborate. And when they collaborate, we create a tie. So here's a tie or an edge in network jargon connecting them. Once they're connected, we can rearrange them and a structure emerges. So here we've used something called a spring embedder, which is pulling together the nodes that are connected and pushing apart the ones that aren't. And we can clearly see that there's a structure. Once we have the network structure, we can apply node level metrics. So this is a node level metric called degree of centrality. The big nodes are the ones that are tied to the most people. The one in the upper left is really small because they're only tied to one person. This is a metric called betweenness. So with betweenness, you calculate the shortest path between every pair of nodes. And for any given node, their betweenness is the number of short paths they're on. So it's a measure of brokering. So you can see that those two nodes that are on the edges of those groups have high betweenness. And then you can also do community detection. I can't see if that's showing up. It is, okay. So that is a network level metric. You use algorithms to find communities. In this case, the communities are really obvious. But in some cases, when networks are large, they're not so obvious. All right, so now let's look at a real example. This is the University of Florida and the authors at University of Florida. So there's a dot for everybody who's an author. This is grants. So there is now a node, a dot for everybody who was on a grant. And this is now connecting people who were co-authors or on grants together. So now there's lines representing the ties. And now this is rearranged. So now we see that there's this large named component at UF. So people who are connected directly or indirectly. And then there's a lot of smaller components, little groups that work together or dyads that work together. So this is the same principle, and this is the kind of thing that we're doing in the analysis today. So here I'm looking at the University of Florida between 2008 and 2020. You're going to see a few slides like this in a while. One thing that you can see is that the main component over time has grown in size. It has become much more dense. And if you look closely, you'll see that the medical, health, and biological sciences has dominated this graph. We have done the same thing for Florida State University. So in the new grant, we are working with Florida State as a partner. We can actually do this kind of analysis for any university. We did analysis for a small university in the middle of Brazil. I gave a talk, and we can do similar kinds of things for any university over time. So you can see FSU in 2012 actually had 3 components that were very different in terms of their topical focus. And now in 2020, those 3 components have now merged into one component. We've also been working with network interventions. So at the end of the first grant, we decided that we'd use networks in order to describe things, but now we wanted to use networks in order to change things. We were inspired by an article by Tom Valente in Science, where he talked about different network intervention strategies. There were 2 that we were particularly interested in. network induction versus network alteration. You can think of network induction at universities as seed grants or pilot awards. You create a set of circumstances and wait for the network to respond. Network alteration is where you use knowledge of the structure of the network in order to affect a change. So at a university, affecting change would be adding edges, adding pods. We don't delete people, we don't delete edges, but we can add edges. So we use the network in order to identify certain structures that we thought would the overall network would benefit from. We picked 15 pairs that we contacted. 8 pairs agreed to come in and talk to us. We showed the pairs where they were in the graph. We offered them to talk to each other and to submit a letter of intent. We got 5 letters of intent. And then out of that, we funded 3 full pilot proposals. These are the 3 pilot proposals. I want to focus for a minute on the third one. This was an interesting meeting. There was a faculty member from the College of Dentistry who focused on failed dentures, had a very large database of failed dentures. And there was a faculty member from the College of Engineering who focused on ceramics. And they sat there and they said, you know, they were vaguely aware of each other, but they never really thought about collaborating. And so they did. They were given a pilot. And out of that actually came a process for tailoring different kinds of molars to different people based upon their patient characteristics. The CTSI considered this a big win in terms of translation. They funded a pilot. It ended up with a solution that actually could affect people. So in the new grant, we have to do that across universities. That's more of a challenge. The previous intervention was based upon a behavioral network of publication and grants. But when you're working across universities, that's a challenge because the edges between any 2 universities is relatively sparse. This graph on the right represents the UF Florida State University network. You can see that there's this big orange group, and then on the edges are some clusters of garnet. That's FSU. There aren't a lot of network opportunities here to do an intervention. So what we decided to do was instead use something called topic modeling. So we use algorithms, reading the abstracts and titles of all the publications. We figure out how those concepts are related. We back those concepts back onto the researchers, and then we create a UF FSU grant like you see here, where now these clusters are around topics. This created a lot more opportunities for collaborations. We invited 20 pairs with 1 person at UF, 1 person at FSU. 7 pairs agreed to participate and submitted letters of intent. We've now funded 2 proposals, pilots out of that, and those are currently ongoing. So that's an approach that we're experimenting with. Just a couple notes about topic modeling. Topic modeling exists within a larger field called natural language processing. So the idea is to come up with a numeric representation of each word or document. And how you can do this, there's many, many different ways. We've experimented with Word2Vec, Doc2Vec, and Pop2Vec, and made a lot of progress. The graph that you see here is from Tom Smith. He's a criminologist. And so what he's done is he's used these topic models in order to develop a network of topics within criminology and how they're related. So this kind of thing can be done with any kind of data. So let me turn to the results for UF and FSU, or sorry, UF and ASU. So again, just the background, Michael Crow came in 2002. I think outside of ASU, he is most well known for the reorganization of the departments and schools. The most widely known reason is this idea of breaking down silos, but what I have learned is that there's this other reason, reason that there were some redundancies. I've heard this described as ASU back in 2002 was many universities on many campuses, and the idea was to make it one university on multiple campuses. So we were given a file by the president's office where there was a line for each event. What were the events? The events were establishing a new entity, a department or school, renaming one, consolidating 2, disestablishing them, or moving them. And so what this graph is showing you is that activity. It's important to note that not all of those events were the same, in the sense that some events involved a lot of people, some events didn't involve very many people. What we are graphing here is just the events. And you can see that most of the events actually occurred prior to 2011. And there was a big jump in the number of events in 2009 and 2010. That is because that was when the Great Recession. My understanding is a lot of those events had been planned for rollout, but a lot of them were done at that time because ASU, like every other university in the country and really the world, had to adapt to budgetary constraints. Arizona, Florida, and Nevada were the poster cases for speculative housing. And so we were all hit. So that was a response, but you can see that most of that reorganization occurred before 2011, 2012. This is another way of viewing the same thing. This is Till Kren's view. So the big circle represents ASU. The light blue circle represents campuses. Within the campuses are colleges and schools, and within that are departments. So you can see that in 2009, 2010, there was all of a sudden an increase in the number of these units. And then by 2018, 2019, there's now 17 colleges and schools and 61 departments and schools. My understanding is that the future is to create two campuses. Is that correct? An online campus and an offline campus. Okay, the data for the analysis I'm about to show you comes from a database called Dimensions. Some people at ASU are actually using Dimensions. You can think of Dimensions like the Web of Science or Scopus, even in some ways like Google Scholar. It's a system that indexes articles and books as they come out. They get their data from sources that these other entities use, Crossref, PubMed, among others. They've got about 100 million publication records in Dimensions. They also have grant data and clinical trial data, which we're not using for this talk. So again, it's important to note that we are researchers at UF, and we are having an outward look in at both ASU and UF. So we have to tag articles with some sort of a field of research or set of fields of research. Dimensions uses a category called, they call it fields of research. You can see on the right a representation within fields of research. There are divisions and then groups and fields. And then you can see all the way on the right all the different fields of research that exist. There's another one called units of assessment that comes from the UK. Both of these systems are widely used, and this is the classification system that we use for this analysis. Till, for some of his work, created two networks. He created a cross-sectional network where he included all co-authorships within a specific time frame, and then a backbone network where he's only focusing on repeated collaborations over time. And so you can see the differences in how those networks develop. Okay, so here's some metrics at UF and ASU, both places. The number of authors is increasing. This is a good time to note that, again, comparing UF and ASU is difficult because at any given time, UF is about twice the size of ASU. So about twice as many people there publishing, and that challenges some of the network analyses that we're trying to do. The graph below shows the number of publications. You can see that in both places, the number of publications seems to have increased in 2015. We speculate that there may have been a change in the publications that Dimensions ingested, and so that's a reflection of that. The dip at the end is not a mirage. That is likely a COVID effect. So there has been, I think, at every university in the country, a dip in the number of publications due to COVID. Okay, the next few slides, I'm showing these circle graphs. So here, the nodes are fields of research, and the nodes are sized by the number of people who are in them. So for example, at UF, medicine's pretty big. At ASU in 2000, 2002, engineering is pretty big. The lines between them represent the collaborations. The thickness of the line represents the number of them. So you can see UF medicine biology was a big collaboration. At ASU, engineering and physics was a pretty big collaboration. The color of the node is something called an EI index. EI stands for external internal. It's a measure that was created by David Crackart back in the 80s. David Crackart looks usually at companies. So he's looking at communication between different, perhaps, divisions in a company. In this case, we're using it to represent the inward or outward focus of a field. So it ranges from -1 to 1. If it's -1, which is dark red, it means that everybody in that field is working with other people in that field. If it's +1 or dark gray, it means that everybody in that field is only working with people outside that field in another field. The closer it is to white or light, it means that there's a balance between the inward and outward. So you can see that in 2000, 2002, both medicine and engineering were relatively inward focusing, even though they had collaborations with biology and engineering with chemistry, they still mostly were inward looking. At ASU, psychology was one of those sort of inward looking fields. At both ASU and UF, cultural sciences tends to be kind of an outward looking field. This is now 2009, 2011. You can see at both institutions, the number of lines between the disciplines has increased. At ASU, many of them have increased and the lines are much heavier. You can see that medicine at UF is still overall fairly inward looking. It's a good time to point out that one flaw with fields of research classification is that medicine is just one big field. And as you'll see, medicine at UF is a lot of people. So it somewhat masks the diversity of field of topics within that area. Nevertheless, collaboration has increased. This is now 2018, 2020. You can see many more collaborations. At ASU, you have heavy collaborations between engineering, chemistry, medicine, biology. Psychology has now become less red. So psychology is now collaborating with medicine. So just based on these graphs, I think that both places have achieved a level of interdisciplinarity that they didn't have in 2000, 2002. This is showing this EI index over time. You can see that ASU has tended to be more collaborative than UF at all times until most recently. And then there has been an increase at UF since roughly 2010 or 11, which I would attribute to the effect of the CTSA. This is looking at the changes in the EI index of different disciplines over time. At both UF and ASU, the environmental sciences and earth sciences tends to be one that has become more collaborative. If you ever do network graphs of those topics, environment always tends to be kind of a central topic. This is looking at tie level, so it's the number of ties. You can see that both at UF and ASU, the number of ties between biology and medicine has gone up over time. So this is looking at those main components. This is UF on the left, ASU on the right in 2000, 2002. You can see that UF already had a big presence in medicine. ASU really was somewhat of a siloed campus. You can see that there are areas that are all connected as part of the main component, but people are definitely not working together as much as they could. This is now 2009 to 2011. At UF, the medicine and biological science is starting to dominate. The graphs becoming more cohesive. Same thing is happening at ASU, except without the domination of the medical field. So this is already some sort of an effect, I believe, from the reorganization. And this is where we are roughly now. You can see at the University of Florida, the total domination of medicine and health sciences and biology in terms of research. And that at ASU, it is a much larger, more cohesive graph. And I think the disciplines are now nicely interacting and collaborating. Okay, now I'm going to show you some network metrics. Over time, the one at the top left is the number of nodes. It's the same as the number of authors, and it has just increased over time. The second one is the number of edges. At both institutions, the number of edges has increased. At UF, I think it's increasing at an increasing rate. The third one is edge density. So that is the proportion of ties that exist out of all those that could exist. As you add people, density has a tendency to go down. At ASU, it has definitely gone down and is now plateaued, but actually at a much higher level than UF. So ASU actually is in some ways more cohesive than UF. The one in the lower left is transitivity. This is the tendency for any three researchers to be connected. And so it is looking over time for that tendency. At UF, transitivity has gone down increasingly, and at ASU, it's also going down, but not as dramatic a rate. And the last one is something called closeness centralization. So this is a measure of closeness, is measured by figuring out the distance between any node and every other node. So high closeness centralization means that there is some domination of the network by a small set of nodes that are close. And I think what's happening actually at both institutions is that they are now developing these small set of communities that tend to do a lot of activity. So sort of research machines. This is looking at publication interdisciplinarity. So for any given publication, how many fields of research are covered? You can see that ASU always has more fields of research covered by any given publication. Again, I would attribute a lot of this to medicine at UF and the fact that medicine is measured as one category. If you look all the way at the right, here's a health research classification that shows you when you use that classification system, UF has a lot of fields per publication. This is doing the same thing, but it's doing it based on author. We can see it at both institutions. The number of fields of research has increased over time. And at UF, again, the same pattern that health research fields per author are increasing over time. This is looking at communities now. We have a publication where we explored what makes a community. So some of that was used in this analysis. So we're looking at the number of communities that exist over time. At UF, there has been this dramatic decline in the number of communities. Again, I think as the communities get larger at the University of Florida, there's a smaller number of them. So they're doing research that involves bigger teams. And that is happening at both institutions. Community modularity is the extent to which the fields are consistent within. I think, so high modularity means that the fields remain consistent. Communities are exploring the same things. At UF, that is declining. So I think that the activity at UF, communities might be exploring different topics. Here we're looking at community interdisciplinarity. This is entropy using, again, these different classification systems. So the average community entropy at UF is for any given year lower than ASU. And for the large communities, actually now they've converged. So UF and ASU are on the same track in terms of the diversity of disciplines. And the last one is a look at stability. So this uses something called a Jaccard index. So what you're looking at is the membership of communities over time and whether they have the same membership. We debated about the use of the word stability. Stability can imply something negative, right? So somebody is either stable or unstable. An isotope is stable or unstable. Really, in this case, that's the word that is used, but unstable isn't necessarily bad. So unstable means that your communities are rotating different people in and out of them. That might be something that you want. So you may actually want to have communities to be unstable. And there is a tendency at both UF and FSU for communities to become unstable over time. Because this was a focus on the school sustainability, we took a little bit of a deeper dive into that. So here on the left is a graph. There are some dark nodes. Those nodes represent people who are now in the school sustainability that were actually here in 2000, 2002. We created a contextual network by looking at the people they were connected to directly or indirectly. We did a community detection analysis and found what communities they're in. So that's what those different colored groups look out like on the left. In 2010, 2012, we start to see how those communities converge. In this case now, the nodes don't necessarily represent single people. They represent multiple people. The people who were disconnected, who were not in those highlight communities, are now not part of the network. We start to see how the communities converge. I want to point to the movement of this community here. The community on the lower right now represents a much larger group who found collaborators. There was one odd node at the top who continues to be an isolate. And then in 2015 to 2017, now that community on the lower right has become a much larger community. There is a very large, dense community that is the core of the school's sustainability. I think you're going to see that represented in some network analyses over the next couple of days. And that's a very cohesive group. The person that was an isolate has now found a couple of collaborators. This is showing just the evolution of that one very dense community between 2002 and 2015 and 2017, and how those have converged. So what are the conclusions? Conclusions, I think, are that both ASU and UF are growing in size and interdisciplinarity. I think comparisons between ASU and UF are somewhat difficult because of the size difference, because of the focus on medicine at UF. ASU smaller disciplines have become more collaborative. Biology and medicine have intensified their collaborative relationship. ASU has become increasingly interdisciplinary, I think often more so than UF. Despite its increasing size, ASU has remained somewhat modular. This could be thanks to the elimination of the boundaries between authors who should be working on similar modern research areas. So we've removed some boundaries. People now have assorted into communities where they feel like there's a natural fit. And this, for me, raises a few questions that I'll raise for the next couple of days. What's the vision for the future, right? So you remove boundaries. We've got this reassorted set of groups. They're more interdisciplinary. Where do you go from here? Do you do it again, or do you stick with these boundaries? I have questions about what would be the advice for the rest of higher ed. Would it be beneficial for everybody else to adopt these boundaries? Or does ASU actually benefit because people come from other places to here where they can work in these new, interesting collaborations, right? Another way of asking this is what happens if everybody does the same thing? I often say that you can't cross disciplines that don't exist, right? At some point, we'll have no benefit from crossing things because we've already crossed them. So I wonder, does ASU actually benefit from the disciplines that are being maintained at other universities? Or would it be better if these new schools and colleges were adopted at other places? And that's it.
All right, so I believe we've got audio coming from Zoom. Time will tell if the audio will come through. However, people can type their questions and I will read them. Or we can give it a go to try to go with some audio. So I will start with one comment that was made most recently from Ted Pavlik. So long as we have undergraduate majors with conventional titles, there will always be legacy baggage of old disciplines that will put pressure on schools and organize around them.
Can I make a comment on that?
Yes.
It's worth noting that removing the boundaries here is meaningful and has been effective. But we have to understand that people are hired into ASU coming from universities that have those old disciplinary boundaries. And a lot of the journals and still a lot of funding mechanisms exist around those old boundaries. So I don't know that it's possible to completely get away from them because people have commitment to those communities.
Great. Monica, I'm going to see if we can get your audio through. So if you want to unmute and ask your question.
Sure. Hi. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Loud and clear.
Okay. Are you familiar with Erin Leahy's recent work where empirically she demonstrates that ASU is not particularly interdisciplinary? It's a series of papers.
No, I'm not familiar with that. We've been delving into this for about a month. So,
Wow. If that's a month's worth of work, I want to be one of your collaborators.
well, you just want both of my postdocs is what you want. But yeah, so I am not familiar with that. I'd love to see it though. So,
Well, so the argument is interesting, and I would recommend this as reading for everybody because also I'm finally getting around to reading Jerry Jacobs in Defense of Disciplines.
I have read that. Yep.
Okay, so the basic argument is that you can have an interdisciplinary environment that fosters interdisciplinarity at the same time that you can have an environment that also fosters disciplinarity. And I think that that's one of the pieces that often gets missed when we're talking about ASU. The reality is we have lots of disciplines at ASU. We just have them in these schools with strange names. And it doesn't mean that people aren't still, that some scholars aren't still behaving in highly disciplinary ways.
Absolutely, because people don't necessarily stay here for a lifetime. So some people come here, they may end up going to another university where those boundaries exist. They compete for funding opportunities. And I'm an anthropologist. I get funding from the cultural anthropology program at UF. I know there are collaborators here at ASU that do the same thing. So I agree with you. I would be really surprised to see the other paper that you were talking about. From everything that we can see, there is more interdisciplinarity here, certainly than there was. I would attribute a lot of it to the reorganization. I only have the one comparison between ASU and UF. I think one suggestion has been to expand this to include a lot of Research One institutions. So we don't get that. Yeah, if you can send that paper to Shauna or Michael or somebody, that'd be good. Or put it in the chat.
Yep, on top of it.
Okay. Is there any more?
So we have one hand raised. Oh, Monica's hand is still up. Other questions from the room or from the chat? Yes.
How much of the are attributable to the network?
Yeah, that's hard to tease out. So the president's office actually provided us with an HR data set where we could attribute people to departments. The problem is that, and I understand why, in your HR system, when you have somebody who was an anthropologist and is now in the School of Human Evolution and Social Change, that is now backwards populated in the field, right? So you're not maintaining an old field that you have established, right? So we can't easily right now look at people over time who was here. We did that school sustainability study. We're able to see that those people are in the school of sustainability now, and we can see that they were here in 2002, but I can't see what they were before, right? That can be done. We can use some of the publication data to try and attribute departments to people, but that's what we would need. So we have that information for UF, but we don't have that for ASU. I agree that a lot of it is due to hiring people, but you've now done some hiring around these new entities. However, some of these people in these new entities are still anthropologists and economists and whatever they were. They may be hiring around those old boundaries, right? Maybe everybody is not hiring around all the new boundaries.
Yeah, question on the floor.
So a great presentation. I mean, this is fascinating, and the author topic on approach that So one thing that we've been thinking about is that exploring is if accessing data that you're using is primarily through publication. And of course, one challenge with publications is that it's a lagging indicator.
Right.
And so I'm wondering how you thought about other kinds of data that might be useful. I mean, that'll always be useful, all publication data, but other kinds of data that might be useful. I mean, certainly grant applications, so partner, collaboration. So one could start triangulating different kinds of data, but I'm wondering how what we thought about that. The thing I've been thinking about is like, maybe we need some sort of equivalent of Salesforce, where faculty are kind of tracking what it is they're working on, so that those data can be analyzed in real time and then looked at relative to publication, so you can get a more accurate indicator of what's going on. But anyway, I just wonder if you thought about that and how you addressed it.
Right. So it occurred to us in the previous grant that publications are a lagging indicator, right? You get a grant or not, you do some research, you write it up, you send it in. It takes sometimes a year or more to get published. So it's definitely a lagging indicator. Because of that, we early on got grant data. So we at least know what grants were funded, but grants are a lagging indicator, right? So we actually got, UF gave us proposal data. So we actually know what teams proposed things, even if they didn't get awarded. We got some of the text. We got to think about that because when you're using publications and grants, those are a matter of public record. But somebody's proposal, whether it was funded or not, is their intellectual property. So we have to be really careful about how we use things like that and what we use it for. I think this happens at ASU, certainly at UF. You can have competition that exists within the same department, right? So labs and fields that are very fastly changing are going to the same funding mechanisms. So revealing that one lab is doing something with that they wouldn't want to know, that's an issue. We've also considered, but haven't yet, used other data sources. There's a database. So Dimensions is owned by a company called Digital Science. Digital Science also owns Altmetric. So Altmetric is a database that looks at, among other things, Twitter, public social media feeds, and then analyzes those data. So the idea is that you do some research, and even before it gets published, it's sort of out there and being talked about. And so they can track that. The CTSAs are all now in a stage where they have to be concerned with impact, particularly impact in the community. That's something that NIH is really, they want to see it now, right? We've invested in these CTSAs, let's see the translation. And so something like Altmetric is a way of gauging that doesn't flag quite as much. So we are exploring different network lenses, but so at UF, we don't yet have a universal system for activity reports across the university. I think that's an important thing. I think that's more or less kind of what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Do you have that at ASU? No. Right. So different colleges do different things. I think we need to have one system where faculty are incentivized to maintain and curate their record, and that would be really useful in a variety of ways.
All right, we got a question from online from Ted.
Okay.
Ted, go ahead.
Hi, so I think it's a really interesting idea to compare UF and ASU as they're both sort of interesting singular entities, but I guess sometimes I wonder how much of the effects you've seen are just general effects of certain patterns over time in academia as a whole, as well as just patterns of scaling. So if you were to scale any university up, I just wonder what would be the null model for what would happen to these interdisciplinary metrics. And I guess I'm wondering if you've got anything cooking where maybe you're sampling from a wider set of universities to establish kind of a null baseline for time effects and scaling effects.
Right. Prior to doing this, I taught a 6-hour network workshop today. So, and I presented just a little of this just so they could get a sense of what's happening. This was here at ASU. And one of the students actually mentioned, well, to what extent is all this due to, For example, all those interdisciplinary funding opportunities, right? Maybe all of it's just because NSF and NIH are pushing us all in these directions. There's certainly something to that. I think the way that if you look at how it's evolved, I think that I see an ASU effect to those boundaries being changed. I do think overall disciplines are really being pushed towards interdisciplinarity. I think journals are supporting interdisciplinarity. So you're talking about the scale effect. So I mentioned that UF is twice the size of ASU. So if I scale ASU up, does it look like UF? No, because you don't have a medical school. So there are some aspects of the structure and the topics that I think are just different. One suggestion again was that we just expand this analysis to lots of universities. So I've shown a bunch of metrics here. What we could do if we have the time is calculate all those across a very large sample of R1 institutions and look at a distribution of those metrics and then see over time where, for example, UF and ASU fit. That's about as much cooking as we've done. So I think it's a good question. I'm telling a story here. I've built a story. I think it's a defensible story. I think the CTSA has had an effect. I think that the reorganization at ASU has had an effect, but it is certainly legitimate to ask if there are other external effects that are driving this. We haven't done a model that proves my story.
Yeah, it would be interesting to have a model of a generic university, or university of conventional
Well,
thought.
I'm skeptical whether I can find a generic university. That's another thing I'm kind of learning here, right? What is a generic university, right?
Indeed. Final question, it looks like, for the time slot, and you can see it in the chat here, and I'll read it for everybody as well. For the publication data networks, is this just at the level of university, or do you know what publications are from professor level collaborations versus graduate student level collaborations versus a mix of professors and students? I can see this getting confounded in some ways, e.g. at the level of NSF grants, as technically these are grants to the university with the professor chair as a PI, even though it is the grad students with the grad students' work and research.
Yeah, so we can see people. So the way this works in dimensions, we see a publication, it has a set of authors. Most of those authors, at least many of them, have an affiliation. That's how we tag a person with a university. Again, our ability then to associate a person with a department, college or school within the university is challenged because we need HR data to do that. Graduate students are represented there, so we didn't filter out graduate students. So graduate students and postdocs, if they published, or if they were, well, in this case, it's publication data, but we can do the same thing with grants. If they're on there, they're certainly included. Let's see, I'm not sure I understand the part about we know what the publications are, getting confounded because of the technicality. So I think what you're talking about are NSF grants like DDRIG. So I did a little tour at NSF for a year. That stands for Doctoral Dissertation Research Improvement Grants. At most universities, graduate students aren't allowed to be PIs. And so they are the co-PIs, and the faculty, their chair is usually the principal investigator, even though it is usually completely the student's work. That would be an issue with grant data that we would, but in this case, we're not actually primarily attributing a publication to any one person. If they're on it, then they are on it, and we attribute it to them. So,
all right, great. I have one more question about topic modeling, but I will spare the audience that one and just accost you afterward instead. So we're at and I say that also because we're at 5:32. So please join me in thanking Professor McCarty for his time and presentation.
thank you.
And thank you all for attending this kickoff to our multi-day event in thinking about networks, collaborations, and universities. And thanks to everyone online who showed up as well. All right.
Thank you.